Since the Democrats' devastating loss in 2024 and all the election postmortems, there has been much conversation and disagreement on how the party needs to move forward. And though the party is still yet to come forward with a cohesive strategy for doing that, there is one takeaway that has seemed to stick. Democrats need to get out there. No one has taken this more to heart than perhaps California Congressman Ro Khanna. Since Trump's inauguration, not only has Ro Khanna made himself known on Fox and a plethora of mainstream media outlets and independent podcasts, but he's also been making trips far outside of his district, including to swing states like Pennsylvania and Michigan. Now, to many people, the congressman's busy schedule is a sign of a potential presidential bid for 2028, as Bernie Sanders' decision to not run again has opened the path for a new progressive to take the stage. But before any of that can happen, Democrats need to regain the trust of their own voters, as a new poll for AP has shown that 2/3 of Democratic voters are feeling pessimistic about their party's future. This, of course, comes not only after Senate Majority Leader or Senate Minority Leader, former Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, allowed Trump's controversial spending bill to pass in March, but also as Republicans are looking to pass major tax cuts for the rich and gut programs like Medicaid. Joining me now to discuss all of this and more is none other than California Congressman Ro Khanna. Thank you, Congressman, for coming back on the show.
Thank you for having me back.
So, a lot to discuss. Let's just start with the budget bill, with the big, beautiful bill that Trump calls. Last week, Republicans unveiled their plan to implement a new work requirement for Medicaid. It would cut nearly 8 million people off the program. Just how devastating is this move for ordinary Americans, including Trump voters who are on Medicaid? And what can Democrats do to stop it, given this is a reconciliation process? There's no filibuster, there's no nothing. Right. Can it be stopped?
Well, I call it the big, brutal bill. It's the largest cut in Medicaid in the program's history. And there are even Trump voters who recognize that. So look, I was just in Allentown. There were about 20, 30 Trump voters protesting me. Some of them had seen me on Fox News, so they said, can we get a selfie? So it starts a conversation. I said, why don't you come into the town hall? There are two places they clapped, one on lowering prescription drugs, the other on not having any cuts on Medicaid. These cuts would mean 8 million people off insurance. It'd mean less money for hospitals, less services, even if you're not on Medicaid, on physical therapy, on mental health counseling. Now, what can we do? There's a hearing this in the middle of the night, around 1 a.m. today. Some of us are going to speak there. I have a simple amendment that I'm going to introduce, that no person, no child under 18 should lose their health care based on this bill. And we'll see if they vote for it or not. My guess is they don't. But if they vote for this bill, they're going to lose their seats in these red districts, which have such a large Medicaid population.
So you are someone who has challenged Republicans on the economy, on tax cuts, but you've also taken pride in working with Republicans on issues you agree with them on. And there's always this debate about bipartisanship in the Democratic Party. You have gone on Fox, as you mentioned. You've gone on right-wing shows. You've put together bills with everyone from Marco Rubio to Matt Gaetz in the past. Is bipartisanship, though, possible, still possible, when the other side is now trying to lock up members of your party? You know what's happened with Congresswoman McIver,
right.
Who is now being charged by Trump's ridiculous lawyer in New Jersey, Alina Habba. How do you work with a party that is arresting Democratic mayors in Newark, arresting judges in Wisconsin, and now trying to charge and prosecute Democratic members of Congress for simply doing their job?
Well, JD Vance and I have gone into a Twitter sparring match over this, and I've called them out. I mean, here they are pardoning people who beat police officers with metal poles and sprayed chemicals on them. And then they're arresting a member of Congress from conducting her oversight, which if you look at the tapes, the escalation was by ICE, not by her. So we have to be very, very clear in calling out the unconstitutionality with Abrego, voting against Lake and Riley, which I did early, even though all these other, unfortunately, swing state senators voted for it, and be clear in our moral principles. But if they happen to do something that I think is in the country's interest, like Donald Trump exploring a deal with Iran so that we can get peace, I am not going to say, well, he ripped, we need to oppose him on political grounds, because I want the world to move more towards peace. But
just to be clear, your position is a pragmatic position, which says if I agree with you, I will support you on that one issue. You're not one of these Democrats, I'm checking, maybe you are, who says, kumbaya, but let's get back to the old days where we're all friends in Congress. There are people on the other side who are white supremacists, anti-Semites, Islamophobes, authoritarians, people who want to lock up some of your colleagues. Surely you're not saying those are people you can work with. Liking this video? Then don't just watch, hit like, share, and subscribe. And tap the bell so you never miss a video or live show. But if you want early access to exclusive content, then you have to head to zeteo.com and subscribe now. You'll be supporting fearless, independent journalism.
Well, if I was one of the old school Democrats, I wouldn't be breaking convention by going into Republican districts. Not exactly the way you get Republicans to work with you. And it's annoyed and irritated and angered a lot of these Republicans whose districts I'm going into to argue for our point of view. So I am under no delusion that there should be bipartisanship for bipartisanship's sake, or that we somehow should compromise our values. But where they come around to our values, there I think we need to move forward. And there are places that they have bent to our values on prescription drugs, on not having foreign wars against Iran. You know, I rather they listen to the progressive point of view there than the John Bolton point of view.
How worried are you about what people call fascism, other people say authoritarianism, this idea that Donald Trump is lawless, is ignoring the Constitution, is threatening the free press, and now members of your party too?
Well, it's no longer a debate. It's happening. Yes, I'm very worried. I mean, they've called universities the enemy. They are firing generals for insubordination, people like General Hogg, who I knew very well. No reason given why they're firing these generals. They are firing people at the NIH, 7 of the 18 directors, just decimating that. They are deporting people without due process. They're disappearing people for speaking out at university campuses for free speech. And they're saying openly that we are going to defy the courts. So obviously we're in a very, very fraught situation and a crisis.
The Vice President of the United States doesn't hold much power under our system. You mentioned earlier you've been going back and forth with him on Twitter on multiple occasions with JD Vance. Why do you go after Vance? Is it because you see him as the heir to Trump, as the next president, the next leader of the Republican Party? Is it because you're of Indian descent and he defended an racist towards India, even though his wife is of Indian descent? Or is it because you just find him annoying?
Probably the latter the most.
Okay.
I mean, he thinks he's the heir apparent, though. Of course, Trump says, well, it could be JD Vance, it could be Rubio. And then he says, and it could be someone possibly from the other party. Trump is going to have an apprentice-like competition for his own adulation. I don't think that JD is guaranteed there, but JD is the only one who's making some pretense of trying to give an intellectual justification to what Trump's doing. Even Trump doesn't say, I want to deprive people of due process. He says, I don't know about it. JD Vance is saying, no. An immigrant shouldn't have due process in this country. Literally making that argument. He's literally saying professors are the enemy. He's literally saying we should have a 35% endowment tax. So I think we have to take on the pretense of intellectualism that Vance represents and push back against it. Whether he was in the Senate or the House, he's the one person who's trying to give that some ideological coherence, and it has none, and it needs to be defeated.
So I've referred to JD Vance as assistant to the regional manager because really Elon Musk is a much more powerful figure at Trump's side than Vance since the start of this administration. You came on the show back in October, and this is what you said. I said Musk is vying for a cabinet job under Trump. And you said he doesn't want to be in the cabinet. He's making billions of dollars. I said he's going to get a big government job. And you said I'd be surprised if he does. How surprised were you that he became suddenly the guy who ran the entire administration for the first 100 days, gutted multiple government departments, put millions of lives at risk around the world?
I was surprised, but I turned out to be both right and wrong. Wrong, obviously, that he joined. Right, that he'd get quickly frustrated and exhausted and leave. And just today it broke that, well, he doesn't maybe want to engage in more big political spending. He's the only person I know who's gone from 65% approval to 35% approval. And his quote unquote DOGE cuts started at $2 trillion and now are $81 billion, if that. That's being generous.
That's being generous.
And so here's the thing that he didn't understand. And I've known him, and I had a conversation with him. I said, you have to work with Congress. Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, 25 of us were ready to meet with him to talk about the defense budget. He never wanted to do that.
They're upping the defense budget.
They're $150 billion up.
And he's still making lots of contracts.
And he has contracts, and he's cutting things like USAID that are insignificant. He went on a cultural crusade. And what he didn't realize is that Americans will cheer you to put rockets up in space, but they don't want those folks making decisions for them. And he came in and he gutted the government. government. Now, maybe you saw it more clearly that he was going to do it.
I think I may have done. You mentioned cultural crusade.
Yeah.
Because that's what I was trying to tell you last year.
Right.
The guy isn't now a culture warrior. Whatever you may have known him back in the day as a tech guy from your district, he is a right-wing culture warrior. You and I disagreed at the time when you had basically blamed Democrats for pushing him away. You had said he should have been invited to the EV summit. Yeah. But it wouldn't have made any difference. The guy is a far right-wing conspiracy theorist, culture warrior, as you yourself have pointed out. Whether Obama or Biden were nice to Musk wouldn't have stopped him from making the cuts he made in these first 100 days. In fact, when you objected to him, he said, "You're a dick" on Twitter. And I called so much for your relationship with him.
Well, I mean, he's unfollowed me and followed me 4 times, and he's certainly not minced words with me. He said my career is over. How about you don't mince some words? How would you describe Musk today? I mean, what he's done in the first 100 days, where he's cut other people's contracts while making himself money. That's he's
corruption.
A heartless, cruel, totally unconstitutional, illegal actions. And he needed to be subpoenaed in front of the Congress. And I've said that he has really violated more than anyone the Constitution of the United States and needs to be held accountable. But the radicalization of people happens over a period. I mean, and I think people are the same anywhere. They want respect, whether you're a steel worker, whether you're a tech worker. Some of them felt disrespected. I'm not saying rightfully or wrongfully. And I think that they first went to Robert Kennedy, then they went to DeSantis. They only jumped on Trump, by the way, when he was winning.
That's true. That's true. Musk didn't endorse him until the summer and didn't appear on stage with Donald Trump. But Musk's own views, they were radically shifting in front of our eyes. I think we watched him get red-pilled on his own website in plain sight. You've said that you are trying to unmask Trump's, quote, false populism. What do you mean by that, and what is the Democratic Party alternative to that?
It means that they're not going to actually create jobs in Johnstown, in Lorraine, in actually bringing manufacturing back and actually having economic renaissance. Let's look at exhibit number 1. They're putting the new AI data center in Abu Dhabi, not in Western Pennsylvania. I mean, this is not a vision of actually having economic renewal in this country. What is our vision? We should have a Marshall Plan for America. We should have a White House Economic Development Council that looks at places like Allentown, Johnstown, Farrell, Pennsylvania, just because I was in that state, says, what do you want? How can we help build that? What can we do in federal financing? What can we say in terms of you build it, we'll buy it? What are we going to invest in universities? How are we going to create the education and healthcare and tech jobs, which are part of a diverse economy? They have none of that. It's just railing against grievance.
So on Monday, Vanity Fair ran a piece on how you believe that there is an opportunity for the party to make inroads with the MAGA base in 2026, 2028 through this more populist vision, this more progressive version of investment in communities. I just wonder, though, and this is something I've been thinking about for a decade and arguing about for a decade, how many inroads, you've been meeting a lot of these, you've spoken to more Trump voters than I have. How many inroads do you think you could actually make with these people because yes, they care about Medicaid, yes, they want jobs back from offshoring, but when you pierce the surface of a lot of these people, in polling, in focus groups, in media interviews, ultimately it does become about culture, not the economy. A lot of it is cultural resentment, racial resentment, not liking the way the country has changed, the browning of America, majority, minority America, immigration, all of these issues. And you can offer, as Joe Biden did in many ways, a progressive economic policy, a strong economy, but they're still not happy about the fact that, oh, there are trans kids in this bathroom, there are Mexican migrants down the street from me, who are all these Muslims here? That is not easily resolvable just by increasing the minimum wage or bringing back jobs, you would agree?
I agree with that. But the economy can be the culture. In other words, when you go to a community and say, I understand you're hurting, I understand you got shafted, I understand your job's left, I'm here to listen about what you want. And if you've done that repeatedly, you're saying to people, I care. I'm showing up. In that Vanity Fair article at the end, Tracy says the working class in Johnstown are like pit bulls, you may be afraid at the first, but ultimately they're very, very loyal and they love you and they want to know you care. And at the end, she didn't agree with many of my policies. She said, yeah, but at least you showed up. Yeah. And it was a start. And I think that is much more important than just the economy. It's not just about the bills you pass. And President Biden started, but he wasn't out there. He wasn't able to make the case in these communities that what we were doing was really showing how much we cared and that was our priority. And I believe if you do that, you can win over a lot of people. But look, we're all a product of our life experience. And I grew up as a son of immigrants, Indian American, of Hindu faith, in a 99% white county in Bucks County. And I had teachers who believed in me and Little League coaches who believed in me, and Bucks County led me to believe everything is possible in America. Do I believe that's the experience of every person of color? No. It happened to be my experience. It gives me a faith ultimately in the decency, kindness, and hope of this country.
When you were on your tour of some of these states, I think it was in Pennsylvania, at the town hall at the weekend, you made a very, very important point about how Democrats are too afraid to embrace bold policies, and Trump can actually show a different way. Let's play that clip.
Donald Trump goes up there and says, I want to conquer Greenland, and our consultants say, oh, you can't be for Medicare for all, that's too radical. What about him saying that you want to conquer Greenland? That's not radical?
I've never understood why Democrats don't make this point more often, that they're always in a defensive posture about, well, is it popular to do Medicare for all? Is it popular to do Green New Deal? Meanwhile, Trump does and says bizarrely unpopular things, and it doesn't matter. Like, nobody voted for the annexation of Greenland.
No, and they vote for him because they see someone with strength
and
confidence and willing to lead. The amount of 30-70 positions that Donald Trump takes is innumerable.
Yes.
I mean, pardoning January 6th rioters, trying to conquer Greenland, having blanket tariffs on coffee and goods. But the Democrats, we get nervous if it's sort of, we want to go to Medicare for all, not just Medicare to 50. We get caught up on these details, and it looks cautious, bureaucratic, incremental, not sweeping. And if you get one person promising sweeping change and the other party saying, well, we're basically going to give you what you've had for 40 years, people keep rolling the dice and saying, let's roll the dice because what we've had for 40 years hasn't worked. And that to me is the real lesson of 2024. People often say, is Kamala Harris capable in terms of answering questions and intellectually sparring? I say she's absolutely capable, anyone who's seen her, but she's so cautious. She's cautious. It was such a cautious campaign.
So will a 2028 Ro Khanna presidential campaign throw caution to the wind, make big, bold promises?
I think there are going to be 10, 15 people who are going to be bold in 2028, and as it should be. We should have a contest of ideas. But right now...
Will you be one of them?
Well, right now the focus has to be politically the House, because that's a way that we start to get political power. I mean, if you start to focus in tennis on the set, you'll lose the point at hand. And so, I want to be part of a bold economic vision of this party, but the first step to it has to be taking back the House.
A lot of people will say the reason a California Democrat is in Pennsylvania and Michigan is because he's getting ready for presidential bid in 28.
Well, I'm going to the Reds districts that we can take back. But I made no apologies for wanting this party to have a better economic message, for having I call it economic patriotism, for having a real vision of connecting with working class folks. And I believe that will be helpful to the party in the midterms, and it'll be helpful for all the candidates in a presidential.
You were co-chair of the Bernie Sanders presidential campaign. Bernie is obviously not running again, especially with the Democratic Party debate about age going on right now, which I want to ask you about.
Well, he hasn't ruled it out.
He hasn't ruled it out, but I think it's fair to say he's almost certainly not running again in 2028. Do you think there can be more than one left candidate, or is there just one lane? If it's not Bernie, then it's AOC. If AOC doesn't run, then maybe it's you. Do you think multiple progressives can run, or will that split the left vote a la Warren Sanders?
Of course, multiple ones can run. There are going to be many, many others on the center side. And I don't think it's that simple of just lanes. I mean, of course it matters. I mean, I've been 100% committed to Medicare for all, to free college, to taxing the billionaires. By the way, that was the best line in my town halls. I represent more billionaires than anyone. We ought to tax them more. How's this a hard vote for 434 other people? But ultimately, I don't think people just vote on lanes. They vote on something much deeper. They vote on the temperament and personality and vision of a person to lead a nation. And in that context, it would be really foolish if the progressives just bet on anyone, including whoever does it. I think it's better to have multiple horses in the race and see what connects with the American public.
The 2024 election did not see a Democratic contested, competitive race because Joe Biden didn't step aside until it was too late to have that race. Harris was effectively coronated. We've got this book out from Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson that Washington media is obsessed with now about Joe Biden's age. Putting aside the debate about when was the right time for him to pull out, you were advocating for him on TV on the very weekend that he announced he was not going to run
I think an hour before.
So what was going on there? Was the Biden campaign there's been criticism that he surrounded himself with a very small team, inner circle, family and friends, long-term advisors, and outside of that, no one else knew what was going on. Was that your recollection?
He certainly had a team. Look, in retrospect, he shouldn't have run. In the conversations I had with him, which were few over the year, he was coherent. But I'll tell you the real reason that progressives stuck with him. Of course, we didn't have all the facts, and we should have. But we also feared that that the party, if he didn't run, would move in a more centrist direction and wouldn't be populist. So it was the
because it's true that Bernie, AOC, you, none of you called for him to step aside. It was other members of Congress. So it was Nancy Pelosi ultimately wielded the knife.
And the party did move more centrist after he ran on economic issues. And so the reason that he had
But the party also lost, right?
Party also lost.
Whether it was left or centrist, you lost. And that was partly because Joe Biden didn't get out of the way. And people like yourself, critics would say, we're giving him cover. You were literally on cable the day him and his people were like, okay, you need to pull out.
I believe it was a mistake for us to have done that, but we didn't have the full picture. I mean, we didn't know his...
You had no clue in D.C. about his incoherence until you watched that debate. When was the moment for you?
The debate gave me real concerns, but then afterwards also seeing him, he did certain things that he did very well, and his advisor said that was just an off night. He's totally fine. He's going to be great. But
for you, it was less about his health and more about you were worried about what would come after him.
Yes, but if I knew he was in the condition he was, I would have called for him to step aside.
He still says he could have won. He said on the video.
He's wrong. He's wrong. I mean, and the lesson I learned is to push back more to sort of party elders and to show more independence, which I did with Bernie Sanders, and probably we all should have this time.
You're in California. Kamala Harris is now being touted as a future gubernatorial candidate.
Yeah.
Would you advise her to run for that? Or the polls show she's still the most popular Democrat when it comes to 2028 running?
Well, that's really her decision. I mean, she's not going to listen to what I have to say.
I mean, you have a view. You just gave me a view saying Biden would have lost if he ran again. Simple question. Would Kamala Harris win if she runs again?
I will say this. She'd probably win for governor, and she'd probably be a very good governor in tackling some of the
But she probably wouldn't win the presidential.
That's genuinely for people to decide.
It's California. You just gave an opinion. You said she could probably win in California. I'm asking, could she probably win nationwide?
I think that the 28 race is going to be wide open with no one having a more than 5 to 10% chance.
Okay.
That's my assessment. So
it's easier to win in California, is your
yes.
point. Okay, David Hogg, vice chair of the DNC, Parkland shooting survivor, 25 years old. One of the young people now trying to bring some youth into the party, said his PAC would spend $20 million primarying people he sees as ineffective Democrats, people who've been around too long. There's been a lot of pushback against him. There's now an attempt to basically nullify his election win as vice president of the DNC, get rid of him completely. Where do you stand on this?
I support him. I mean, I support the idea that we should have primary challenges. I won my seat on a primary challenge. AOC won her seat on a primary challenge. There are many people who run in primaries, and if he wants to have primaries, fine. Now, what I told him is, as DNC chair, vice chair, he can personally say he's not going to endorse, but he can still be affiliated with an organization that's engaged in primary challenges, just like many other people have. And I feel that was a reasonable compromise. But the assault on him, it seems unfair.
A couple of foreign policy issues before we wrap up. India, Pakistan. We had a very close moment, I think it's fair to say, not long ago, with the terrorist attack in Kashmir, which the Indians blamed without evidence on Pakistan. They then bombed Pakistan. Pakistan responded, et cetera, nuclear powers, people worried about nuclear weapons. Where do you stand on all of this? Because you are co-chair of the Indian-American Caucus, I believe. You've been out to India. You've met with Prime Minister Modi. You came out and said... You made a statement, talked about how Pakistan is a dictatorship. You went on CNN. You said it needs free and fair elections. I think we can both agree the last Pakistani elections were very strange. Imran Khan, the former prime minister, is in prison. But you haven't said similar things about India, your critics would say. How come you haven't held Modi's feet to the fire? Not just on the state of democracy in India, authoritarianism, attacks on minorities, but also the attack itself on Pakistan. Was that not a violation of international law to bomb another country without any real justification or evidence?
Well, I'll take both of those. Certainly, you wouldn't. And I've been critical of Modi in terms of the attacks on pluralism, not having sufficient respect for people of different faiths. When I was in India, I met with people in Haryana whose houses were bulldozed, Muslim Indians, and I met with Gandhi's great grandson, dissidents of the regime. And no elected official has done that precisely because I wanted to stand up for pluralism. But surely you would agree that Modi is not Asam Munir. I mean, he won an election, and he won an election, by the way, showing that Indian democracy works, because he won far less seats than he expected. And so I think that there is a difference between a democratic leader, though he deserves criticism on pluralism. On the second point, I do think from my understanding and my understanding talking to our military that there was terrorist operations against India on that attack, and that if they were targeted,
U.S. intelligence has evidence that Pakistan was behind the attack in Hogg.
I don't think they have intelligence.
So then on what basis do you get to bomb a neighboring country if you can just bomb anyone and say, well, this is the Israeli argument, we can bomb whoever we want, we don't need to provide evidence?
Well, I don't think you can compare what Netanyahu is doing for the past year and a half and the civilian casualties to what I think were targeted counterterrorism strikes on areas where people...
But with what basis is my question, right? Under international law,
yes,
you need to provide evidence. The Indian government did not provide to the UN or to anyone else, as far as I'm aware, evidence that Pakistan was behind this attack.
Well, they should provide that. I mean, they claim very strongly that they were. I believe them, and that's why I came out for it. I mean, I had spoken with both the Indian government and our own State Department. If they turn out to be wrong, then I will certainly say that I was wrong in supporting it. But my understanding is that they have that evidence, and I certainly would call on them to share that evidence when it's appropriate with the United States and the world.
You've been someone who's spoken very eloquently about Palestinian freedom. I want to ask you about Netanyahu. You just mentioned him. What about the people of Kashmir who live in the most militarized place on earth, one of the most highly surveilled places on earth, a place with massive human rights abuses, as you know, from the Indian Armed Forces going back decades? Should the people of Kashmir have freedom?
I think that they're likely to be settled in a bilateral negotiation with India and Pakistan, where you have India part of Kashmir and Pakistan part of Kashmir. At this point, having an autonomous Kashmir seems an implausible solution, and I don't think that that's where you'll get peace. My sense is to get a South Asian Union, you have a much better shot to have Pakistan and India figure out what the appropriate line of control is, and have part of Kashmir, part of Pakistan, part of Kashmir, part of India, and make sure that human rights are upheld. It seems to me that's more pragmatic.
Which they're not being, unfortunately, and where they're not being upheld most right now is in Gaza. We're speaking on a day where the Israeli government has been very... Did you like this video? Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel and turn on notifications. For exclusive content and to support our independent, unfiltered journalism, head over to zeteo.com. Your support matters.